We have on the phone, speaking of now, we have somebody joining us on the phone from Cypress College. This is Peter Mathews. He's professor of political science, American government, international relations, and public policy issues. Let's focus on this moment first, Professor Mathews. This celebration, a long time coming.
Yes, indeed. Good morning. How are you doing today?
Fantastic.
I know the Egyptian people are really celebrating.
Thank you for joining us. Tell us about this scene. You've been watching it, and tell us what this means to you.
Okay, what I think this means is, first of all, the initial euphoria of the Egyptian people is wonderful. They've been working for this so long. Thousands of students got together and did it through Facebook to get the crowds out there. Right now, the question is, who will succeed? Will the power really be in the hands of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, where, formally speaking, Vice President Suleiman has put the power in their hands formally? But I think Suleiman is not going to disappear right away. He was there, the secret intelligence agencies for years, and it was Mubarak's right-hand man. They had bonded together when Mubarak there was an assassination attempt on Mubarak in Ethiopia, and Suleiman was there when he helped to save Mubarak's life with that assassination attempt, and they're right next to each other. So it depends whether the protesters will actually accept Suleiman being somewhere either in the background or foreground, but the key right here is to see how much power will be shifted to the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, and will they actually allow elections about 7 months or 9 months from now, in September?
And let's talk about the region itself and how, you know, the U.S. has felt, the position of the U.S. has been, Hosni Mubarak is a force of stability in the region. Give him the money necessary to maintain stability, to be a good friend and neighbor to Israel, and so, you know, sort of hold your nose and look past what is happening inside of Egypt in the better interest of the U.S. Is that do you see that continuing? And what is the fear if with Mubarak no longer in power?
Well, here's the thing. The U.S. has been providing about $1.3 billion of aid to Egypt that went right to the military. The other two, you know, the rest of it, about another 200 billion or so. I mean, sorry, 200 million or so went the rest of the government, but most of it was the armed forces. And the key was to keep stability because Egypt was completely with the U.S. on the peace treaties with Israel, including the 1979 treaty. And here it is now. Egypt also helped to seal off the border with Gaza to prevent, arms coming in from possible terrorists. So Egypt played a key role in the peace process with Palestine and Israel. And so now the United States will seek to hopefully work with the new Egyptian government to maintain that type of a relationship. But really, it's very uncertain what could happen. It depends on who takes power from within the armed forces and whether or not other groups in the opposition will have influence with the armed forces. I do know that the Muslim Brotherhood had been kept out of the armed forces quite well by the military people themselves because they didn't trust them. But the Muslim Brotherhood itself has 3 different factions in it. So it all depends on how the dynamics of the opposition in terms of what the armed forces will do. And, of course, that would affect the U.S. relationship with the armed forces and stability between Palestine and Israel. Egypt is a major player there, of course.
What is the religious makeup of Egypt? We know there are Christians and Muslims. Tell us, give us the breakdown.
It's about 11% Coptic Christians, and the vast majority of that, beyond that, is Muslims. So you would say at least 89% or 85, 88% are Muslims, and Sunni Muslims, which is very interesting because you know about the Sunni-Shia divide. Iran is dominated by Shia, whereas the Sunnis are the vast majority of the Muslims in Egypt. And the Christians are a significant minority. The Coptic Christians is a 2,000-year-old church, an Orthodox church, which traces limbs way back to Jesus Christ's time. And they are a minority that has certain concerns about this type of revolutionary movement because Mubarak actually helped to protect them to some extent. They were worried that possibly sometimes the extremist Muslim attacked them. And the Coptic church in Egypt was actually burned recently. So it's a very interesting society as far as religion goes. But, the Revolutionary Square, the people in the interior square, were saying Muslims and Christians are one. And that was very interesting because some of the Christians joined this revolution out in that square as well. So I think the armed forces do have Christians in them. In fact, there might even be 1 or 2 high-level officers that are Christian. But the armed forces themselves do have Christians in them as well as the majority Muslims.
And Professor Mathews, you know, as you were talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, there are some who are obviously concerned, and early on especially, that that Egypt could spiral out of control and in a revolutionary state become an Iran. The people we've spoken to this morning locally here, Suleiman, Rania Bahiri, they have both said to us, please don't spin this as an Islamic revolution of any kind. As Mr. Suleiman was just saying a moment ago, this is an everybody movement, and it's an expression of the will of the people. Do you agree?
That is very true. Yeah, that is absolutely true, that the vast majority of people in Tahrir Square and who led the revolution were students and graduates of colleges who were concerned about the poverty, not having enough jobs when they got out of college. And there were many other groups of people there. The Brotherhood is only they won 20% of the seats in the 2005 election when they ran as independents. They were not allowed to run as a party. When they ran as independents, they had a relatively open election for them. They won 20% of the seats in the parliament. So it doesn't mean that the overwhelming majority anyway. There's still a significant minority, and they are divided among themselves in ideology. There are some extremists who are more like the Iranian revolutionaries, and then there's a big faction of moderates who do believe in, having some sort of influence of Islamic law in the system. And then there's a completely more liberal group in the Brotherhood who really would basically say that there's certain morality of Islam should be brought into society, but they shouldn't necessarily be completely fundamentalist and forced Islam or anyone else. So there's three different factions in there, and it depends which one dominates. But overall, I would say this revolution was not led by the Muslim Brotherhood. It was led by the masses of Egyptian people, and particularly young people.
And this sort of thing happening in Egypt, is there, I just wonder, in the capitals of the Arab world there, are there, what will their reaction be, and how will they react to this happening in a nation that was ruled by, yes, in title a president, but in reality a dictator? Do the people in the capitals of the Arab world, how will they react to this news?
Well, the people on the street are jubilant, and they might even be inspired by it to take on their own authoritarian leaders. But the leaders themselves are going to be very concerned, and so will the United States, because they want more stability, of course, than anything else. But we cannot stop the tide of history. I think that the U.S. needs to be, as President Obama is, I think, coming around to recognize, on the side of people of the country. And as long as we are friends with them, we come across with economic development and work with them diplomatically, they will actually be more moderate, or moderates will prevail. The United States should be seen as supporting the progressive movement of history in those countries, and the people on the streets of those countries will really value us for doing that. Well, so I think the leadership in those countries are really concerned right now, like in Tunisia. What happened in Tunisia, now Egypt, and they're going to be worried about the rest of the area. Yemen, for example, is also under massive protests, and Saudi Arabia is also a very big factor there, because that's our major oil supplier in many ways.
How would you assess how U.S. officials have handled all of this? We were talking to, as I mentioned a moment ago, Suleiman from the L.A. Society of Egyptian Americans, and he was describing it as a sort of flip-flopping, that in one breath we were saying we support the will of the Egyptian people, in the other breath we were saying, we want President Hosni Mubarak to have a peaceful transition, and that didn't go over so well on the street in Cairo. Has the U.S. handled this well, and how do U.S. officials need to move forward in the days ahead?
Well, the Obama administration was divided. Their key advisors, some of them on the side of saying we need to support the protesters because that's definitely, they're in the right, and also they're going to end up winning. And then there's another group that said, let's go easy on this. We need to preserve stability. He is one of our, President Mubarak is one of our allies, and we got to hold on and make sure the transition is smooth. So it did seem like a flip-flop. I agree with you and with Mr. Suleiman. So I think what we need to do from now on is President Obama has to be very clear that the U.S. stands on the side of the people of the Middle East. And even if there are despotic rulers there, they have to change their ways. And there has to be economic development. This is the key. Half of Egypt is in the poverty line or below. And a vast majority of those people, half the people are under 25 years old as well. Youth and poverty and lack of opportunity, there's a major combustible mixture there. And the presidency right now, President Obama and the American administration, Secretary of State, have to be on the side of what the Egyptian people want and need.
Okay,
and that will have influence as well.
To that end, I always am curious about what now. I mean, literally tomorrow, will we see international aid pouring into the nation? We talk about the abject poverty that many Egyptians live in, $2 a day some of people make there. Will we see international aid pouring into the country, the International Red Cross going to assist to get, because it does take a kickstart to get the country back running again?
Absolutely takes more than a kickstart, because there's such a large group that don't have jobs, and there's unemployment and lack of opportunity. So yeah, there ought to be international aid. The U.S. will probably lead that, since we were the biggest donor to Egypt anyway, about $1.5 billion a year. But the key is to reduce that gap between rich and poor. The Mubarak family alone took, it's estimated they actually took over, Mubarak himself, $40 billion out of the country, or he has even amassed, and his son about $17 billion. So this is something we have to work on and ensure economic development reaches everyone. I think the international community will come aboard, because Egypt is such a key player in the stability of that part of the world and the world as a whole.
We're looking at pictures right now of Mohammed al-Baradei, and I don't know if these are live pictures or tape. What role might he play in the future of Egypt?
I mean, he'll have some role, although he's been spending most of his years outside of Egypt as the director of the IAEA, so he doesn't have a very solid local national base there, political base. But he's a very intelligent man, lots of prestige, a Nobel laureate. So people will use him as an advisor, I would think so. The opposition would put him in an advisory position, and someone will have to come up from the opposition to become a unifying leader, because the opposition has not had that unity in leadership. That's been a real problem. And the military will be looking at that when they decide when to hold the elections. It's very important the Egyptian military does hold elections, you know, in a couple of months or even 6 months at least, and work toward that. They have to be seen to progress in that direction.
Discussions will obviously, if they're not underway now, but they will have to be underway to start planning and outlining the timeline for elections. Look into your glass crystal ball, if you will.
Yes. Oh, well, what I see is, you know, President Mubarak said that he would leave office in September, and that's when his term of office was up, actually. So elections would have to be held in September or way before that, or at least the planning has to begin right away, and the timeline has to be set up for at least the next few months that the election date will be set. And international observers will be involved, and you'll have to make sure there are people who know about election laws that can help out. The Egyptians themselves have to run the show. And no one can be seen to be dictating to Egypt what to do right now, because the Egyptian people really feel that they have actually had a say in this and accomplished something. So it's a very sensitive time, obviously, and we should all be keeping track of that.
We've been broadcasting live, Professor, on this topic, on the revolution that we're watching here. We've been broadcasting this continuously for about an hour and 20 minutes now, and I can just imagine some folks at home right now starting to have fatigue already from it and saying, okay, we get it. There has been a change in the leadership in Egypt. How does this affect me here in Southern California? Answer that person. Oh,
tremendously. It will start off with the Suez Canal and the Suez pipeline, which carries about 4 million barrels of oil a day. And if that gets in any way blocked off by instability there or the wrong leadership in Egypt, then that right there is going to skyrocket our price of gasoline, for one thing. And beyond that, I mean, Egypt is the largest Arab country. There are many Arab Americans in this country who are concerned about their people, where they came from, and also Israel, our top ally in the Middle East. Israel's stability is very much affected, and you know the Middle East can become a tinderbox, unfortunately. And you've seen how much problems there and so much of war in the Middle East there and South Asia, Afghanistan. All of that really affects us. I mean, we're paying so much money already in terms of foreign aid, and also in having troops now in Iraq, which are costing $100 billion or so, in Afghanistan. So Americans here need to really focus on this and not become fatigued so easily, because this is a very dynamic situation that hasn't been settled yet. So we should help in any way, and we should be knowledgeable when we try to tell our leaders what we think they should do regarding this.
This is the first. This is the first step.
If you do need a couple of, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm listening.
No, I was just saying this is certainly the first step. I was just going to say, Professor, that this makes for a very real-time teaching moment for you as a political science professor.
it's very exciting, and certainly hopefully things will work out well.
You're watching TV unfold right in front of you, folks. Thank you so much. We want to mention that from Cypress College, Peter Mathews is a professor of political science, American government, international relations, and public policy issues. He joined us in covering this moment because he makes a very good point. This is one of many moments that will now play out in Egypt as President Mubarak steps down.